This is the Truth to Live By podcast, a ministry of Windward Baptist Church. In this podcast, you will hear the verse-by-verse teaching and preaching of Pastor Kevin Akana. Learn more about our church from our website at windwardbaptist.org.
2 Kings chapter 14. I'll give you the points. They all begin with C. First we see compromise, then cleansing. Compromise, verse 1 through 4, cleansing, verse 5 through 7. Then we see conflict, verses 8 and 9. Carelessness, verse 10. Consequences, verse 11 through 18. Conspiracy, verses 19 through 22. And corruption, verse 23 through 29. 2 Kings chapter 14. So first thing is compromise. Verse 1 through 4. In the second year of Joash, son of Jehoaz, king of Israel, reigned Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. So now we see as the focus goes from north to south, we see that this is the heart of the kingdom, because this is where Jerusalem was. This is the two southern tribes, which was made up of Judah and Benjamin, and the headquarters Jerusalem. So it's now focusing on a southern king, Amaziah. He was 25 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoiadan of Jerusalem. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father. So he did the right things, but he wasn't like David. So you'll see that, as I know when you're going through Kings, you'll see that over and over again. You'll see two phrases mostly, that he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, as did David his father, or not like David his father, or he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, not like David. Or it will say that he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not turn from the ways of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which caused Israel to sin. And it'll keep making a comparison, David, Jeroboam, David, Jeroboam. And sometimes when you see that, you're thinking to yourself, but David did some pretty bad things too. I mean, think about some of the things that David did. We know, of course, that he committed adultery with Bathsheba. We know that he murdered Uriah, so that was already bad. But what about all the lies that he told that caused all those priests to get killed? And what about all the people that he slaughtered when God didn't even tell him to do that? That he went around to neighboring towns and villages. What about the time when he acted like he was a crazy person, and so that they would not send him back to the to be with his people, so he was able to stay back with the enemy of God's people, and he had to pretend like he was crazy. So he did a lot of things, but the difference between David and a lot of these other kings, and the reason why everyone is always compared to David, is because the Bible says he was a man after God's own heart. He was someone who always was pursuing the Lord, and he knew that his sin was the problem. And when he was confronted with his sin, he repented. And that was the difference. And when he got right with the Lord, you notice that a lot of times when the Bible talks about how good David is, doesn't bring up all the sin that he did, because he was forgiven. So that's a message that God wants us always to remember. Be like David. He had problems. He did wrong. He did terrible things too, but he got right with God. A just man falleth 7 times, the Bible says, and riseth up again. If we confess our sin, he's faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us of all unrighteousness. We got to get back up. We got to get right with God. But this king, he compromised, and it says in verse 3, he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father. He did according to all things as Joash his father did. Howbeit, the high places were not taken away. As yet the people did sacrifice and burnt incense on the high places. So he did that which was right, not like David, and also he did according to all things as Joash his father did. Now, Joash was someone that repaired the temple in chapter 12. So we know that Joash was concerned about the spiritual things of the temple, and so he was that way, which is good. And I think that's very important for a leader. I think that's very important for a parent. I think it's very important for a Christian that we understand the priority of the temple, of our relationship with the Lord, worship, corporate worship, private, personal worship, and that this king was concerned about that. And so that's good. But he compromised in a very important area. The high places were not taken away. So the way that the heathen worshiped the false gods was they would, because it was very important for them to be in a high, elevated place. So they always wanted to be high up. And really, we can worship the Lord from any place. It doesn't have to be a high, elevated place. But the high places were places that were high elevated places, and they would build their altars on top of these high places, and then they would worship the false gods. So these high places should have been taken away. It's kind of like someone who's trying to quit crystal meth, but he's not going to get rid of his pipe, just in case. He's going to hang on to that thing. He's going to hide it, put it somewhere, just in case. You never know what you need for. I don't know what else you need it for, but that's like someone who has people that he knows he should not hang around with, but he keeps them on the speed dial or keeps them on the phone. Doesn't delete the contact information, just in case. It's kind of like you kind of know you're going to mess up, and when that time comes, you want to be able to have access. So you're not real serious. That's how this king was. He wasn't real serious about God. And you'll see every single time, you'll see this happen. You'll see it a lot, that there'll be kings that are good. They did that which was right, but it'll say that. It'll say, but the high places were not taken away. They didn't remove the high places. They kept that contact information. They kept that paraphernalia. They kept that access. They kept that funds. They kept that stash. They kept that person because they knew they're going to go back to it. And every time the nation went back to it, every time the high places weren't taken away, they went back to it. And fairly quickly. Like it was almost like in the same, either in the life of that king or the very next one. So it's far better for us to destroy the high places, to just knock it down. It also makes us, it says something to everybody else. It's making a statement. You remember when Gideon, when he destroyed the temple? I mean, yeah, he did it at 2 a.m., but at least he did it. He got rid of it, right? But he didn't. So we start off with compromise. And I already gave you the point, so you know the last point already, right? What was the last point? Just write it down. Corruption. So it begins with compromise. It ends with corruption. Now there's a few points in between, but whenever we compromise, it's kind of like this. When you compromise, you're already going down the wrong direction, and you just continue to go that way. There's what they call a slippery slope of compromise. You can think about Lot. Remember Lot? How when he had the opportunity to choose where he was going to go, he set his eyes on Sodom and Gomorrah because it reminded him of Egypt, right? And he pitched his tent in that direction, And he ended up in Sodom and Gomorrah. And he actually lost everything because of the slippery slope of compromise. He was on the outskirts of the city, and then before you know it, he's in the heart of it. I mean, he's actually a leader in the city. So that's how it goes. It just continues on that downward trend. So it begins with compromise and ends with corruption. That's just in this chapter alone. So we know that he compromised in verse 4. The high places were not taken away, as yet the people did sacrifice and burn incense in the high places. I'm sure they justified it. We are worshiping God, but we're worshiping God in the high places. Sometimes people will worship the Lord their own way. We got to worship the Lord His way, how He wants to be worshipped. Then we see cleansing, verse 5 through 7. And it came to pass, as soon as the kingdom was confirmed in his hand, that he slew his servants which had slain the king his father. And of course, his father was assassinated, and so he goes after the people that killed his father. But the children of the murderers he slew not, according unto that which is written in the book of the law of Moses, wherein the Lord commanded, saying, the fathers shall not be put to death for the children, nor the children be put to death for the fathers. But every man shall be put to death for his own sin. So he follows the Bible, and he does not kill their children of those that killed his father. He just kills them because he wanted to do what the Bible said. And that was good. I mean, that was the things that he did, that which was right. He slew of Edom in the valley of Salt 10,000, and took Selah by war, and called the name of it Joktheel unto this day. And so he had success in battle. Now, in 2 Chronicles, which gives some details about the battle that he had against Edomites, and he went to battle against them, and he hired 100,000 mercenary soldiers from the northern kingdom. And because he was wanting to make sure he was going to have victory. But a prophet came and told him not to do it, because God is not going to bless you, because the northern kingdom is wicked. So don't do it. And so he already paid him the money. He told him, forget about it. I'm not going to allow you to fight with us. And they got upset about that, even though they got the money. They're upset. So now we see conflict. Verse 8 and 9. So he actually felt pretty good, that he had victory over the Edomites. But as soon as he came back, he ended up worshiping the false gods of the Edomites. And so now he's going to go down. Conflict. Verse 8 and 9. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, come, let us look one another in the face. That means we're going to do battle. Doesn't mean they're just going to stare at each other. And Jehoash, the king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, the thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, give thy daughter to my son to wife. And there passed by a wild beast that was in Lebanon and trode down the thistle. He's basically saying, who do you think you are? You think you're that tough because you had victory over the Edomites? He says, you're just a little thistle, and a thistle. How dare you come up to the cedars of Lebanon and call me out, basically? I'm going to destroy you. Which is what happens. Especially since he ended up, sometimes after victories, after great victories, can be our most difficult time, our most vulnerable time. And right after that victory, he ended up messing up. And so he goes to battle here. He's thinking he's all that. He's very powerful, and he loses. Conflict. What he just figure, what I'm going to do today? I'm going to call up the king of the northern kingdom, and I'm going to challenge him to a battle. Well, so that's conflict. And then carelessness. Verse 10. Sometimes carelessness gets us into a lot of trouble. Thou hast indeed smitten Edom, and thine heart hath lifted thee up. That's what happens a lot of times to people, right? They have some success. I mean, you've seen it in athletes, right? They have some success and they change. They become good at something. You know, they have a huge contract, or it could be someone who becomes a movie star, or someone that just became very successful quickly, and then what? They start to have pride. Well, that's what happened to him. Thou hast indeed smitten Edom. Yeah, you had victory over Edom. I mean, he was going to use the northern kingdom. He hired some of them. God told him through the prophet not to do that. He listened, and he had victory, but God gave him the victory, and then he ended up having pride, worshiping the false gods of the Edomites. And their false gods couldn't help them against him when he had God on his side, and he goes in. Thine heart hath lifted thee up. That's what happens sometimes to us. We think that we're really good at something. And instead of giving God the glory, we take the glory upon ourselves. And it says, thine heart hath lifted thee up. Glory of this, and tarry at home. For why shouldest thou meddle to thy hurt? It says you're meddling. You're being careless. You're doing some things you shouldn't be doing. That thou shouldest fall, even thou and Judah with thee. And the sad thing is, because he's the king, people are going to go down with him. Now we see the consequences. But Amaziah would not hear. So it happens, right? Sometimes you have friends that try to warn us, try to help us. But we already have our mind made up. We already have our mind set. That's all he was. Amaziah would not hear. We should thank the Lord when we have somebody who's a true friend that's willing to tell us something that maybe we don't want to hear but need to hear. Maybe you shouldn't date that person. Maybe you shouldn't get that job. Maybe you should be in church every Sunday. Maybe you should stop doing that. Maybe you should start doing this. Don't tell me those kind of freaking. Mind your own business. That's a good friend. Sometimes, they tell us things that we don't want to hear. That's good. But he wouldn't hear. Therefore, Jehoash, king of Israel, went up, and he and Amaziah, king of Judah, looked one another in the face at Bethshemesh, which belonged to Judah. And Judah was put to the worse before Israel. Pride goes before what? A fall. And they fled every man to their tents with their tail between their legs. And Jehoash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah at Bethshemesh, and came to Jerusalem, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim unto the corner gate 400 cubits. And he took all the gold and silver, and all the vessels that were found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasures of the king's house, and hostages, and returned to Samaria, which was their headquarters. So he loses all that. The people end up becoming hostages. He loses all of his gold and silver and his treasures and all that. And they were taken to Samaria. Why did he even call them up and call them out? Verse 15. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoash, which he did, and his might, and how he fought with Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Yes, but do we have that book? Remember Chronicles? Chronicles is only going to chronicle the southern kings. We're not going to hear about the kings of Israel anymore. And Jehoash slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. And Jeroboam, his son, reigned in his stead. That's nice. He named his son after the original Jeroboam who caused Israel to sin. That's a slap in the face to God. Verse 17. And Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, lived after the death of Jehoash, son of Jehoaz, king of Israel, 15 years. And the rest of the acts of Amaziah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? Now that book we have. The book of Chronicles. 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Okay, next thing is conspiracy. There's a lot of conspiracies out there. In fact, when he was crucified, he died, he was buried, and he rose again. And they said that was a lie. So they had this conspiracy going. To have a conspiracy, you only have to have more than one person involved. And there was a lot of people involved, and they paid off the guards and told them, hey, just tell them that they stole the body of Jesus. And it says here in verse 19, now they made a conspiracy. So conspiracies are in the Bible. They made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem. And he fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and slew him there. And they brought him on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. And all the people of Judah took Azariah, which was 16 years old, and made him king instead of Amaziah. He built Elath and restored it to Judah. After that, the king slept with his fathers. And then now, verse 23 through 29, we see corruption. From compromise to corruption in just one chapter. In the 50th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria, and he reigned 41 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. He restored the coast of Israel from the entering of Hamath unto the sea of the plain, according to the word of the Lord God of Israel, which he spake by the hand of his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai the prophet, which was of Gath-hepher. For the Lord saw the affliction of Israel, that it was very bitter. For there was not any shut up, nor any left, nor any helper for Israel. And the Lord said not that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam the son of Joash. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, and all that he did, and his might, how he warred, and how he recovered Damascus and Hamath, which belongeth to Judah, for Israel, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son reigned in his stead. You know, when you read this chapter, and a lot of the chapters in the book of Kings, a lot of them are just like this. And Kings, in this part of Kings, is not easy or fun to preach through. It's kind of like a repetitious thing. And you hear this, that the northern kingdom, they didn't have any good kings. See, there's 39 kings of the divided kingdom. And the northern kingdom did not have one good king. Not one. The southern kingdom had a handful. And some, they're pretty good, a little bit bad. Started out good, finished bad. Started bad, finished good. And there was a handful of ones that were really good. Like Hezekiah, of course, King David was good, but it was before it was divided. But after it was divided, there's just a handful of kings that were good. And the nation as a whole kept on doing the wrong thing. Kept doing evil, kept doing evil, kept doing evil, kept doing evil. And yet, today, they're still God's chosen people. In fact, this is a message that God has in the Bible, and it's applied in the book of Romans, where Paul's trying to make a major point to the Romans that he writes the book of Romans to. And if you know anything about the book of Romans, it starts off with the the doctrine of everybody's lost. I guess the doctrine of depravity. You know, that the heathen, you know, they're lost. Well, you have the person doesn't believe in God. Well, he has the creation to tell him. That's why he's without excuse. So you have the moral person. He's a good person, but he's still lost. He has his conscience, and his conscience, he doesn't listen to his own conscience. You have the heathen that says there is no God, but he has the creation that tells him there is a God, and he doesn't listen to he doesn't observe the creation. And he's lost. The moral person doesn't listen to his conscience. And then you have the Hebrew who doesn't listen to the commandments. Creation, conscience, commandments. None of them listen to it. They're all lost. They're all depraved. And so the final conclusion is, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. No matter if you put yourself in whatever category. Well, you know, I never knew that there was a God. So it's not my fault. Well, you knew there's a creation. Well, you know, I'm a pretty good person. Oh, so do you ever tell a lie? Well, yeah. Well, then you're a liar. Have you ever taken something from someone? Well, yeah, but not often. Well, then you're a thief. And according to Jesus, if we hate someone, then that's the same thing as being a murderer, because it's the same seed, it's the same root cause. And then here you had God's chosen people, and they had the commandments. They didn't listen to it, and they're all lost. So that's how the book of Romans is. The first, from chapter 1 to chapter 3, verse something, like verse 20 or so, that everybody's lost. And then the book of Romans says how a lost person can get saved. And the book is about justification by faith. That's what the book of Romans is about. Everybody's lost. This is how you get saved. And then it goes all the way to chapter 8. And it tells us this. Once you're saved, you can never lose it. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. And in the book of Romans, which says this in chapter 8, for I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. Well, then someone's going to say this. They're going to say, really? Yep. What about Israel? I mean, look what they were evil and wicked, and then God tossed them out, right? And then that's why Paul in chapter 9, 10, and 11 speaks about Israel. He said, okay, I'm glad you brought that up. Now, no one is saying this to him, but he's just writing this as if he's being the devil's advocate for what he's writing, because he knows that's what people are going to be thinking. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. Well, what about Israel? There are people today that believe in what is called replacement theology. And what replacement theology is saying is that the Jews are no longer God's chosen people, but that the church replaced Israel. And so now all the promises that God made to Israel is applied to the church. And all the curses that God said would happen to Israel is applied to Israel. So they get the curses, and then we get the blessings. And that's it. God is done with the nation of Israel as a nation. They no longer have anything to do with being God's chosen people. It's just us and the church now. That's not true. They're still God's chosen people. And the church is a different entity. The church is a different body. In fact, Paul talked about that in Ephesians and in Colossians in some ways, about the mystery. The mystery in Colossians, as we talked about on Sunday, is Christ in us. That Jesus is going to live within us through the Holy Spirit of God. That's the mystery. And that's what happens when you get saved. And then in Ephesians, the mystery is that there's going to be a new body, church and Jew and Gentile in one body, the church, and that's the body of Christ. So that's a mystery. It's not mentioned like that in the Old Testament, directly that way. So I believe that God has placed the nation of Israel in the background scene at this time until the church is raptured. But then he's going to focus back on Israel. And in Zechariah chapter 14, I believe it is, chapter 12 or 14, it says that 2/3 of those that are Jews are going to be killed during the tribulation period. But it describes it as coming through the fire. 1/3 is going to come through the fire. And then it says in Romans, since you're already in Romans chapter 11, verse 26 says, "And so all Israel shall be saved." Does that sound like Israel is the church? Isn't the church already saved? So that's a different entity, right? And so all Israel shall be saved. In fact, look at this verse. Verse 28, talking about Israel. "As concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sakes. But as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sake." See, would that be the church, that there are the enemy? There are enemy for your sakes? That wouldn't match, right? So he's talking about the nation. You know what it says here? The gifts and calling of God are without repentance. Sometimes people will quote that and say, if God's called you to do something, it's good. You know what he's talking about there? He's talking about Israel. So when you and I believe that God is not finished with the nation of Israel, they're still his chosen people, even though they rebelled against him, even though they're agnostic, even though they're atheists, even though they're religious and lost, they're still God's chosen people. No matter what has happened. And in the end, they're going to all get saved during the tribulation period. But the good news is, if that's true for the nation of Israel, when you're reading through the book of Kings, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, and you see these wicked kings, you see the people, I mean, it gets really bad. I mean, when you read the book of Ezekiel, when Ezekiel is teleported or he travels back to Israel, either in a vision or he's teleported there, and God shows him why he did what he did. Do you remember that? And then he's showing him, look at what's going on in the nation. There's pagan worship everywhere. In fact, let me show you the temple. Look, right at the gate of the temple, the entrance, there's an idol there. Right at the entrance. He said, let's go in the temple. Look at what the priests are doing. He says, they're worshiping the sun. Look at the women, they're worshiping Tammuz. Look at all the images on the walls. All these graven images, or all these images to four-footed beasts and creeping things and all this false worship. He said, that's the reason I departed from the nation. But they're still my chosen people. Why? Because of an unconditional covenant that God made with the nation. In Genesis chapter 12, God called Abraham and said, I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to bless those that bless you. And I'm going to curse those that curse you. You could see the nations of the world that have turned their backs on Israel, what has happened to these nations. And then he said, and I promise to give you the land of Israel. And he promises him the land. And then he said, from your descendants is going to come forth the Messiah. That was in Genesis chapter 12. The covenant was confirmed. God signed on the dotted line in Genesis chapter 15. And when he signed on the dotted line, he promised to keep his side of the covenant. He even promised to keep Abraham's side of the covenant. That makes it unconditional. So what that means is that the Abrahamic covenant is an unconditional covenant that can never be altered or changed or deleted. Ever. And no matter what other covenants come up, does not change that contract. In fact, that's what Galatians is about. It speaks about that. But the good news is if that covenant is unconditional, then the new covenant is also unconditional. Because it's based upon who? Jesus Christ. So in the book of Romans, when he says that nothing can separate you, and if that holds true to Israel, that holds true to you and me. If that doesn't hold true to Israel, if they're no longer God's chosen people and God forgot about them and He removed them from being His chosen people, well then you and I can also be removed too. It's the same. So when I read this chapter, we see that in the same way. We see the king that compromised in the southern kingdom. We see the kings in the northern kingdoms, all of them compromised. And we see it goes from one king doing good to another king just being evil. And it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And God finally says, I'm out of here. And then when in the book of Ezekiel, you see the Shekinah glory, or the glory cloud ascends off of the Holy of Holies, comes out the holy place, comes out the eastern gate, and out of the city. And he leaves. And he does not come back until Jesus comes to this world. So the good news is, we may mess up, but always get back up. We got to be like David. David was a man after God's own heart. And David was someone who messed up, but he got right back up. Because he wanted a relationship with the Lord. He wanted to get to know Him better. And when he was confronted and when he messed up, he turned back to God. Not like Saul, not like a lot of these other kings. And so that's why God wants us to know over and over and over and over and over and over, many, 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 many times over, it brings up King David. He was not like his father David. Be like David. Do what David did as he got right with God over and over and over again. And that's what we have in 2 Kings chapter 14. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes?
You have been listening to our Truth to Live By podcast, a ministry of Windward Baptist Church. This podcast is supported by the gifts and donations of its listeners. You can make a secure donation through our website at windwardbaptist.org.